Good morning and good Shabbos, everyone. I want to share with you a portrait that I have in my home. It's a portrait of the Lubavitcher Rebbe at a Farbrengen. Very often at the end of a Farbrengen, the Rebbe would give wine to everyone in attendance. And there is the Rebbe at a Farbrengen giving wine to my father. It's called Koshel Bracha, a cup of blessing. Right behind my father is my older brother Pesach. And right behind my brother, there is myself receiving wine of blessing from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Tonight and tomorrow is the day of YUD Shevat, which is a festival for Chabad Hasidim, because it marks the 70th anniversary of the day that the Rebbe took over the leadership of the Chabad movement after the passing of his father-in-law, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. In 1951, the Rebbe became the 7th Chabad Rebbe. And we all know how the Rebbe and his work literally transformed the entire world. And that's the first thing we have to realize about the Rebbe, that the Rebbe was not a Rebbe just for his followers. The Rebbe was the Rebbe for all Jews, and he taught his followers to find every single Jew, reach out to every Jew with love, and teach them about Yiddishkeit and connect them to Torah and mitzvos. But the Rebbe didn't stop there. He wasn't just the Rebbe for all Jews. He was the Rebbe for all of mankind. The Rebbe often talked about the 7 Noahide laws, how it's our responsibility to teach the world about the basic laws of morality and righteousness and goodness, faith in God and justice and compassion. The Rebbe often talked about a moment of silence in the public schools, that children should know there's a God and they should start every day thinking about how there's a God who watches over everything they do and the world is not just a random jungle. The Rebbe was the first Rebbe who was concerned with the entire world and tried to shape the entire world. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, said something very profound once. He said that the Rebbe took over the leadership of the Chabad movement in 1951, just 6 years after the end of the Holocaust. And he said, as Hitler came and sought out every Jew with hatred, the Rebbe sought out every Jew with love. The Rebbe was God's gift to the world to heal a generation that had just experienced the worst tragedy known to mankind, the murder of 6 million of our brethren. Last night at the synagogue, we were honored and privileged to have a Zoom call with Dr. Edith Eger. And she's a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor who is filled with light and love and teaches the lessons she learned from the tragedy of the Holocaust, surviving Auschwitz, losing her family, and became a therapist, a psychologist, and helps people overcome their own trauma. And one of the beautiful things she said last night is, you can't heal what you don't feel. Meaning, don't suppress your pain and your memories of the past. Feel it, experiencing it, but then realize, as she said, I'm not a victim. I may have been victimized, but I am a free person, and I will choose to live a happy, meaningful life. And she said that after the war, she was suicidal for a while, but she pulled herself up and said, I want to live. I want to stand for something. It's easy to die. It's a challenge to go on living a meaningful, happy life. And that was the Rebbe's message to the world, that despite the greatest tragedy known to mankind and to the Jewish people, we have to choose life, and we have to live meaningful, happy, productive lives. And this day of the 11th of Shevat, which is observed every year by Chabad Hasidim and really by all Jews, and really should be celebrated by the world, is the day we think about the Rebbe and his impact on our lives and how we could be connected to his vision of the world and his message. And the Rebbe often said, how do you connect with me? By studying my books. And indeed, there are literally over 100 volumes of the Rebbe's teachings, and not just in Hebrew and Yiddish, but translated in almost every language, English, Spanish, Russian, so much so that there are multiple apps, like one I have on my phone called Chayenu, Chayyenu. You could download it for free, and you could have the Rebbe's teachings at the touch of your buttons whenever you want. And just a few moments a day of studying his teachings will inspire you to see the world through his eyes. When Dr. Edith Eger talked about you can't heal what you don't feel, I was reminded of a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of all Hasidism. And he says, based on this week's Torah portion, when the Jews go out of Egypt after the 10 plagues in this week's Torah portion, when they come to the sea, the Red Sea, God says, do not fear the Egyptians. Ki kasher re'isim es Mitzrayim hayom lo sasifim lerosam od ad olam. Just because you have seen Egypt today, you will never see them again. And the Baal Shem Tov says, why doesn't it just say that God said, you've seen them today, but you'll never see them again? What is the because? Key. Because you've seen them today, therefore you'll never see them again. And the Baal Shem Tov says exactly what Dr. Edith Eger says. All of the psychology is in the Torah. Baal Shem Tov says, because you're not afraid to look at your Egypt, to stare it in the eye, to look at your own personal suffering and bondage and oppression and past persecution, if you could look at that which torments you, if you could look at your personal Egypt and not fear it, then you will never see it again. You will be able to transcend it. But if you run from it and you hide from it and you suppress it, then it will conquer you. And that was the message of God to the Jewish people. Don't be afraid to look back. We look back every day at the Exodus from Egypt. We remember what God did for us, but we also remember the suffering and the pain. We talk about it on the night of Seder. We always remember that. But because we're not afraid to look at it and learn from it and experience it and feel it, therefore we could heal from it and transcend it. And that was the Rebbe's message to our generation. As Jews, we should never run from our Jewish identity because of the Holocaust. We should not try to hide our Jewish identity. On the contrary, we should look at what happened to us and become even prouder and stronger Jews. And tonight and tomorrow, as we observe the day of the YUD of Shevat, and we think about the Rebbe and his message was love your neighbor as yourself. The Rebbe devoted his life to loving others, to caring for the well-being of all of humanity. And indeed today, the Rebbe's emissaries are literally all over the world, spreading his light and his love and his goodness and his Yiddishkeit. And that's what we have to become. All of us have to become his emissaries. I conclude with the following story. The Rebbe every Sunday had thousands of people who wanted to see him, and he didn't have enough time to give private audiences. So thousands of people would line up online to get $1, which would be given to charity and a blessing from the Rebbe. And one time this woman came along to the Rebbe, and she started to tell the Rebbe her problems, and she needs a blessing. The Rebbe gave her blessings, and then she repeated her problems a second time, and the Rebbe blessed her again. By the third or fourth time of repeating the problem, the Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Groner, sort of gave her a nudge to move along because there are thousands of people waiting online. The Rebbe gave Rabbi Groner a very cold stare, and Rabbi Groner backed off and let the woman continue. Later in the evening, when the Rebbe came into his office, he asked Rabbi Groner why he pushed this woman along. And Rabbi Groner said, well, the Rebbe is standing on his feet for so many hours, thousands of people are waiting. She told the Rebbe her problems once, twice, 3 times. You blessed her, so I told her it's time to move on. The Rebbe looked at Rabbi Groner and said to him in Yiddish, when a person comes to me and tells me their problems, they nemen arap a stein from Herzen. They're removing a stone from their heart. And every time they repeat their problem, they're taking off another stone from their heart. And the Rebbe said to Rabbi Groner, was artir, why do you care if a Jewish woman takes another stone off her heart? That was the Rebbe's message. Be there for others. This portrait of the Rebbe, which hangs in my home, my parents' home, and my brother's home, reminds us every day of the Rebbe's love. And just as the Rebbe is pouring wine, which represents blessing, when I look at this picture, I think of the Rebbe's blessings, his blessings to the world that continue to pour forth. And every one of us can drink from his teachings and be inspired. And together we will realize the vision of the Rebbe to transform this world into a place of goodness, kindness, and righteousness, and to merit the coming of Mashiach. Have a wonderful Shabbos. And this Shabbat, in commemoration of the 11th of Shevat, learn and be inspired by the teachings, the message, and the vision of the Rebbe. Have a wonderful, uplifting Shabbat.